Solving multi-step inequalities. Our first VIC states that when solving multi-step inequalities, your procedure is the same as in equations. However, make a special note to VIC number 2. And VIC number 2 states, when multiplying and dividing by a negative number, you must flip the sign. So if it's greater than, it flips to less than. If it's less than, it flips to greater than. The steps to solve, like I said before, are the same as solving for multi-step equations. So our first step is to distribute. Get rid of any of the parentheses that might be in this inequality. Then clear the inequality of fractions. Remember, this is optional, but if you don't like fractions, it's an easy way to get rid of them. 3, get the variable on one side of the equal sign and your numbers on the other. So if you have variables on both sides, you're getting all your variables on one side and your numbers on the other. And the last is to get the variable by itself, so that it's all by itself and it is positive. So let's look at some examples. Our first example is 2 times the quantity t plus 2 minus 3t is greater than or equal to a negative 1. So our first step is to distribute. So 2 times t is 2t, and 2 times 2 is 4. Then we bring down the minus 3t greater than or equal to negative 1. Then you need to combine like terms on both sides of your inequality. So we're going to cover this side up. 2t minus 3t gives us a negative 1t. Then we bring down the plus 4. We look on this side, we only have a negative 1, so we do not have any like terms. So it's greater than or equal to negative 1. Now this is just a two-step inequality. It's a plus 4, so we're going to subtract 4 on both sides because you do your addition and your subtraction before you're multiplying and dividing. So we subtract 4 on both sides. These cancel. You're left with a negative 1t is greater than or equal to a negative 5, because a negative 1 minus 4, if you keep change, is a negative 1 plus a negative 4. That gives you a negative 5. Now this is multiplication, so we're going to divide by a negative 1. Well, VIC number 2 told us that if we multiplied or divided by a negative, we needed to flip the sign. Well, we are dividing by a negative number. So we need to, these cancel. We have t. This sign needs to flip. So now we have a less than or equal to, and negative 5 divided by negative 1 is a positive 5. So now we need to check our answer just like we did with equations. Now this is less than or equal to 5. So when you're plugging this in, where equations we just had one number we could plug in, here we could have multiple choices. It just has to be less than or equal to 5. I'm going to use the number 5 just because it's easy and I know that t is equal to 5. So we plugged in 5 everywhere t was located. Now you're just going to follow order of operations. So 5 plus 2 gives me 7. So I have 2 times 7 minus 3 times 5, which gives us 15. 2 times 7 is 14. 14 minus 15 is a negative 1. Well, negative 1 is greater than or equal to a negative 1. And it's actually equal to negative 1. And since this sign right here tells us what we can have an equal to, our answer is correct. Let's look at number 2. We have 4p plus 2 times the quantity p plus 7 is less than 8. Our first step is to distribute. So 2 times p gives us 2p, and 2 times 7 gives us 14. We bring down the 4p. Now we're going to combine like terms on each side of the inequality. Well, 4p plus 2p gives me 6p. We cannot combine with 14, so I just bring the 14 down. I look on the right-hand side, and I just have an 8, so we rewrite the 8. It does not have like terms on that side. Now, we want to add and subtract before we multiply and divide to get the variables on one side and your numbers on the other. So this is a plus 14. So we're going to subtract 14 on both sides. Well, these cancel, and you're left with 6p is less than negative 6. Well, 6 times p, the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So divide by 6 on both sides. I'm dividing by a positive number, so we will not flip the sign. So we have p is less than negative 1. Since this is a less than sign, when we check our answer, we have to pick a number less than negative 1. We cannot pick negative 1 because it's not a less than or equal to. So negative 1 is not part of our solution. It's everything less than negative 1. So I'm going to pick that p is going to be a negative 2 because negative 2 is less than negative 1. So I'm going to plug in negative 2 everywhere I see a p. So now we have 4 times a negative 2 plus 2 times the quantity, negative 2 plus 7. Order of operations, so I'm going to do negative 2 plus 7 is 5. 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. 2 times that 5 is 10. Negative 8 plus 10 is a positive 2. And a positive 2 is less than a positive 8. So our solution is correct. All right, let's do some practice problems. We have 6z minus 15 is less than 4z plus 11. Well, we want to get our variables on one side and our numbers on the other. I like my variable on the left, so I'm going to move this 4z to the other side. So I subtract 4z on both sides. These cancel. 6z minus 4z gives me a 2z. And I bring down the minus 15. So now I have 2z minus 15 is less than 11. Well, this is a minus 15. So the inverse operation is addition. So we're going to add 15 on both sides. These cancel. We're left with 2z is less than 26. This is multiplication, so we divide by 2. We're dividing by a positive number, so the sign is going to stay the way it is. And we get z is less than 13. Number 2, 3b plus 12 is greater than 27 minus 2b. I'm going to get my variable on one side and my numbers on the other because I do not have to distribute because I don't have any parentheses. So I'm going to add 2b because this is a minus 2b. So I add 2b to both sides. These cancel. I'm left with 5b plus 12 is greater than 27. Now this is a plus b, and remember we always add and subtract before we multiply and divide. So I'm going to subtract 12 on both sides. We have 5b is greater than 15. Divide by 5. Since we're dividing by a positive number, the sign stays the same. And we get b is greater than 3. Number 3. We have negative 3 times the quantity, 4 minus m, is greater than or equal to 4 times the quantity, 2m plus 1. Well, step 1 tells us to distribute. So I'm going to distribute negative 3 times 4 is a negative 12. And negative 3 times a negative m is a positive 3m. I'm going to rewrite my greater than or equal to sign. Now I need to distribute on the right hand side. 4 times 2m is 8m. And 4 times 1 is 4. Now I need to get all my variables on one side and my numbers on the other. So I'm going to subtract 8m on both sides. I'm left with a negative 12 minus 5m because 3 minus 8 is a negative 5. Remember, minusing a number is the same thing as adding the opposite. Is greater than or equal to a positive 4. Now I need to get this negative 12 on the other side so that I have my variables on one side and my numbers on the other. Well, this is a negative 12. So I want to get to 0, so I'm going to add 12 on both sides. I'm left with a negative 5m, because remember you take the sign with it. is greater than or equal to 16. Divide by -5. Well, if I divide by a negative number, my sign is going to flip. So now I have m is less than or equal to a -16 fifths. And you can leave that as a fraction. That is fine. And number 4. We need to distribute first. So we're going to distribute this -6 to the x and the -4. -6 times x is a -6x. And -6 times, if you change this to plus -4, so you get a plus 24 is greater than or equal to, and now we need to distribute on the right-hand side. 7 times 2 is 14x. 7 times 3, you get a -21. Now we need to get our variables on one side and our numbers on the other. So I'm going to subtract 14x on both sides. These cancel, and -6 minus 14, if you do keep, change, you get a -20x plus 24 is greater than or equal to a -21. Now, we need to get this number on the other side so that our variables are by itself. So we need to subtract 24 on both sides. These cancel. I get a -20x. It's greater than or equal to. Now we do keep, change here. 4 plus 1 is 5. So we get a -45. I'm going to divide by a -20 on both sides. Well, I'm dividing by a negative. So this sign is going to flip. And we're going to be left with x is less than or equal to 45/20ths. And it becomes a positive 45/20ths because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Well, this can be reduced. 5 goes into both of these. So we get a positive 9/4. So our answer is x is less than or equal to 9/4. And just like in 1- and 2-step equations, we can have real-world problems for multi-step inequalities as well. It says Dave is a sales associate. Each week he earns $250. So each week he earns $250 plus a commission of 3% of his sales. This week his goal is to earn no less than $460. Write and solve an inequality to find the dollar amount of sales he must have to meet his goal. Okay, do we know how many sales he needs to make in dollars? No. So that is going to be us defining our variable. So we're going to say X is the amount of sales, the dollar amount of sales he has to do. Now, no matter if he doesn't sell one thing, he's still going to make $250 each week. So $250 is an automatic money he gets each week, plus a commission of 3%. Well, how do you write 3% as a decimal? Remember, we will move the decimal 2 places to the left. So 3% becomes 0.03. And that you're going to multiply that percentage by the amount of money he sold. So if he sold 3 cars, each at $30,000 a piece, we're going to multiply that money amount by 3%. We want it to be greater than or equal to 460 because he wants no less than 460. He's okay with 460. He doesn't want less than 460. More than 460 is always a good thing. The more money, the better, right? So now, we need to go ahead and subtract the 250 that he automatically makes. So then we're just looking at the dollar amount of sales he needs to have by the end of the week. So we subtract 250 on both sides, and we're left with 300 times x needs to be greater than or equal to 210. We're going to divide because this the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So divide by 300 on both sides. And so to meet his goal, his amount of sales needs to be greater than or equal to $7,000.